had never been a mixologist. I had never been a bartender. I'd never served a drink behind a bar in any capacity, but I had a real love for food science. I was a big fan of trigeminal effects, and I had been running my own sort of little business on the side, teaching little kids how to make butter from scratch and pasta from scratch with science. And then at the behest of a bunch of people who had taken classes from me, they said, have you ever made a cocktail? You should enter this national cocktail competition. It was open to amateurs and pros. I entered, and then as one of the amateurs in the competition, I didn't just win the first top 12. I got whittled down to the top 12, went to New York, competed, and won first place in the entire United States. And I just rode the wave. I got sent to Italy. I studied under some of the best mixologists in Italy, and then I came back and I worked for Koval Distillery and I worked for Reinhold Distillery. And the next thing I know, I launched Hollow Leg, and I'm a huge fan of science. And Scott, like, I just want to preface this by saying, like, I think you've probably been to a mixology class before. And if you can notice, I don't look anything like your regular mixologist. I am like a bouncy blonde. There's no like tattooed like sleeves up on here, no suspender straps, you know what I'm saying? Like no ironic facial hair. Like I did not look like what was kind of churned out as the regular bartender or mixologist. But I have this huge, big love for science. And so with Julia childlike conviction, I really wanted to tackle all things cocktails with no pretension, with a lot of science, and with just a lot of pep and excitement, because why not? Cocktails are fun. They should be fun, right? Our industry just needs a change up because there's so many good people doing so many good things. But really what we've done is we've glorified the bartender to the point where we think that they are the person who knows best what we should be drinking as humans. And I don't agree with that. I believe that the best bartender is likely going to be somebody like yourself, being able to make drinks for yourself, because everyone has a different palate. For example, Scott, okay, when I first entered this industry, every cocktail class looked exactly the same. So let's say that you and I were in a margarita making class, and we were there and we were making margaritas, and there was one recipe, and it was called the best margarita, which, by the way, there's no such thing as a best any cocktail, because really it's how you like to taste it. Let's say that the cocktail was too sour for me, but it was too sweet for you. There was no science as to how do you correct something gone awry in a cocktail. Like, where does that come in? And so I really honed in and I started educating myself, as well as taking classes with the Wine and Spirit Education Trust, and going to reading a lot of white papers about neurogastronomical science, which includes things like trigeminal effects, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, things like the sensory olfactory bulb, things like sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami, so all taste buds, and then figuring out how to be the best cocktail Sherpa, getting people to the top of Cocktail Mountain. So if you make a cocktail today, for example, Scott, on screen with me, whether it's got alcohol or not, and you tell me it's completely nauseating, horrifying, just the worst thing you've ever put in your mouth, I can lead you in the way, because I'm kind of like the Marie Kondo of cocktails, right? Like she loves a good mess. I love a really bad cocktail because it gives us room to educate, learn, and really sort of have a launch pad for science and understanding why it is that that particular cocktail just does not fit with your palate and your tastes. I might be one of the people who hates the most the words virgin and mocktail. So if you're listening out here and you've heard those words, like a mocktail, a virgin cocktail, Scott, we're not 12 years old anymore. There's nothing sexy about going to a bar as like my age and ordering a mocktail or a virgin cocktail. What I like to call them is no proof. So alcohol has proof in it. So you've got like a proof of alcohol, and these have absolutely none. And no proof, I think, is sort of, it reclaims the dignity and the self-respect that should go along with non-alcoholic cocktails. Because here's the thing, if you don't want to drink, and you don't want to have alcohol for whatever reason you don't want to have alcohol, this is not a point of shame. This is actually kind of cool, because what we can do is leverage science called specifically trigeminal effects, and we can really figure out what we need to do to make those cocktails chemically exciting in your mouth. Like there's a party in your mouth and everyone's invited, which is really the whole goal of a cocktail to begin with. Because when we're working with the base ingredient, if you are making with alcohol, which is just any type of booze, you're getting the ethanol sting of alcohol. And this is Scott, I'm sure you've done this before. Have you ever taken one of those shots and done one of those little shimmies? Ugh. You know what I'm saying? Like you shimmied it down because it was just stung the back of your throat. If not, then I challenge you to Malort, Scott, which is just a very Chicago thing. Guys, if you've ever done that, a little shitty, or if you've ever had a whiskey and it's burned the back of your mouth, this is actually a trigeminal effect. It's the sting of alcohol being picked up by your nerve endings in your mouth. And this is actually detecting all chemical sensations. So if you guys have ever tried to take a cup of hot coffee in the morning and you start to take your first sip, but you stop yourself because it's super hot, the trigeminal nerve is actually the thing that distinguishes between hot and cold. So it's actually your nerve endings that are warning you, hey, this is gonna burn you and you should stop yourself. But alcohol, temperature, those are only two trigeminal effects. Scott, there's like a plethora. For example, cooling effect of menthol. So when you brush your teeth at night and you feel so fresh and so clean, that's trigeminal effect of the cooling effect of the menthol. If you've got something like the pungency of garlic or ginger, or that sort of mouth clearing effect that you get with the nasal passages with English mustard, wasabi, mouth numbing effect of clove, of Sichuan peppers, things like the bubbles in carbon dioxide. The reason you're able to taste that bubblage is because, of course, all of your nerve endings. And if you didn't have it, everything would taste flat. And that, think about this, Scott. A beer forevermore would be warm and flat if you didn't have trigeminal nerves, or they were damaged, because you would never be able to taste those things. It's a fate worse than death. Even if you don't have alcohol, there's so many other trigeminal effects that you can literally dip into science-wise to make interesting, no-proof cocktails. And that's what we're also going to be touching on today. I'm a big fan of the rule of thirds. So if we're having a 6-ounce cocktail, 1/3 water in the form of ice, because if you'll hear me wax poetic later, I love water in the form of ice. It's the most important part about mixology for dilution and temperature. And then, of course, you've got 1/3 is going to be booze in our cocktails, and 1/3 is mixers. And this way, we're keeping that trigeminal effectiveness equal. We're getting a good temperature balance with dilution. We're getting a great ethanol balance with the alcohol. So instead of one alcoholic shot, we're putting in 2. And then, of course, we've got all the mixers, which are a great base. And I really wanted to start on that sort of streamlined way of looking at things and then build on it. Dilution and temperature are literally the most important parts about mixology. And just hear me out, because I know it sounds really ridiculous, but think of it this way. If you're making a no-proof cocktail, well, alcohol is not going to be the most important part. And remember, mixology is the study of the science of drinks. So it doesn't matter if it has alcohol in it or not. It's important to really make sure that alcohol is only secondary when it comes to cocktails, but temperature and dilution are so incredibly important. First of all, Scott, fun fact, we didn't even have cocktails until the turn of the century when the ice trade was made popular. So before that, it was a lot of just straight alcohols. And then we got to have dilution changes, we got temperature changes, and the cocktail was born. And so if you think of it this way, dilution, number one, 1/3 of every cocktail is water in the form of ice. And it's because you want to take these sort of harsher ingredients and you want to really smooth the edges down. So instead of just taking shots, which you can do, and more than likely you probably have done, but instead of taking shots, we can smooth that ethanol sting and really make it something that's drinkable for a larger drink and for a longer period of time. The best thing I can tell anybody is, if you want, add smaller amounts of sugar, and then you can continue to add more sugar as you go. Remember, we're budding mixologists, but not all of us are budding magicians, which means we can add things into our cocktail. Very hard to take them away, you guys. So make sure that you're sticking things in your glass in small conservative amounts so you can build up later. Remember, guys, we're talking about trigeminal effects. Party in your mouth. Everyone's invited. Every cocktail should do this for you. Every single one. If it doesn't, if you take the sip of a cocktail and you have to turn to your friend at the bar and say, is there any alcohol in yours? Because I can't taste any alcohol in mine. Or if you're given a no-proof cocktail and it tastes like a glorified juice drink, they're doing it wrong. You need something that is going to make all of your nerve endings fire. This is like what cocktails are about. This is the crux of mixology. Temperature, dilution, and then of course we've got trigeminal effects. And one of the 2 things that you could be using is you could use a jalapeno. So guys, now we're not in basic territory. We're not #basic anymore. Now we've got layers of flavors. We've got the mouthfeel and the drying effect of that grapefruit juice. We've got the earthiness of pomegranate. We've got that lovely pungency of the ginger. We've got a little bit of acidity in those oils, which is really giving it a lot of aromatics. We've got a little bit of sugar to balance everything out. And now what do? We grab some ice. If you're at a bar and you get served something horrifying, it's okay to send it back. It's okay to be polite and talk about it and say, oh, it's just not what I like or what I ordered. But before you even get to that point, I'm going to encourage everybody to be curious. If you read, because a lot of these cocktail menus, guys, and I've been in the industry for quite some time, so I know a lot of the alcohols out there. I know a lot of flavor pairings, but I can't know everything, right? Like, there's no way. Like, with the amount of stuff that's being produced and how things get churned out, anybody who thinks they know everything knows nothing, because frankly, it is an ever-changing topic and there's so much and it's so incredible. But I ask questions. I'll say, excuse me, I usually like sour cocktails with more of a floral note. I don't know what like half of these ingredients in the raw cocktail are. Is this like what I'm looking for? And what they can do is they can really steer you in the direction of something that you might like. Every person's palate is different. And what somebody else might love and 9 people might love and the 10th person hates, that's not a reflection on my skills or anything else. It's just a reflection if I'm rude about it. The reflection is, can I use science and really, in layman's terms, explain to this person, what is it that you don't like? How do we fix it? And how do we go forward and make all of these cocktails that are in that particular category something that you'd be willing to drink? And then you're off to the races.